But let me send a message to our friends across the country, especially to the Government of Canada in Ottawa. Let me put this in perspective. A few months, late last year, GM announced about 2,000 layoffs at a shift at their plant in Oshawa, about 2,000 positions being affected. That galvanized national attention and got sympathy from people from coast to coast, perhaps especially here in Alberta, because we know what tough economic times are. For a week or longer, that was the central issue that Canadians focused on. Well, let me put this in perspective. 2,000 layoffs at Suncor would be the equivalent of 8,000 layoffs at an auto company in Ontario. It's the equivalent of 4,000 layoffs at, let's say, a company like Bombardier in Quebec's aviation sector on a proportionate basis. So let me send a very clear message to the Prime Minister and the Government of Canada. This announcement today by Suncor underscores that what's happening in Alberta today is nothing less than an economic emergency. The Government of Canada would be moving heaven and earth if we saw layoffs of this scale in the Central Canadian manufacturing industry. And yet last week, we saw a federal throne speech which did not even reference the crisis in the largest sector in Canada's economy, our oil and gas sector, in the province that has done more, far more than any other, to create jobs, wealth, opportunity, and government revenues over recent decades, thanks in part to the work of companies like Suncor and the men and women being affected by these layoffs. So we need to send a message to the whole country that this really is a national economic crisis, what's happening in the energy sector in this province. And this cannot be dismissed, because we cannot have a strong Canadian economy without a strong energy sector and a strong Alberta economy. And we cannot pay for the hundreds of billions of dollars of new government spending without getting that industry back on its feet. So once again, we implore the federal government to work with us to help get this industry back on its feet. Please, at the very least, do no more harm. Stop policies which would make companies like Suncor even less competitive during this critical moment of adversity. Stop. At least hit the pause button on the clean fuel standards, which will make Canada's energy sector uncompetitive on a global basis. Please work with us to stop the intrusion into the investor uncertainty created by Bill C-69. Suncor was notified recently that the federal government is going to step in over our jurisdiction to do a C-69 review on the proposed expansion of their base mine, which that company now thinks may lead to 10 years of reviews before, post-COVID, they could get back to investing. Please, while we just got certainty from the Supreme Court of Canada on the Trans Mountain decision with respect to the Crown's duty to consult with First Nations people on major resource projects, let's allow that new settled law to create some certainty before the legislative ratification of UNDRIP, which some read as giving a veto to single First Nations communities, even against the consensus for development that exists broadly amongst them. Please move approvals at the speed of business. This summer, we've lost the opportunity to create thousands of good-paying jobs through TC Energy's proposed expansion of the Nova gas transmission line because the federal regulator did not approve it on time for the construction season. We're not asking for a special favor here. Just realize there's an economic emergency and accelerate the regulatory process so that those jobs can be created. Please help get the foot of the federal government off those who are trying to create jobs in this tough environment. Please listen to all of the provinces and territories on the need for fiscal fairness. Every province that has backed up Alberta's demand for fiscal fairness by lifting the cap retroactively in the fiscal stabilization program what I call the equalization rebate, that would be worth $6 billion that we would put to work immediately on job creation programs, on supporting the unemployed, on training programs, and on critical investments. We appreciate some of the federal actions over the past 7 months. We've tried to work together. But as today's announcement underscores, this truly is a jobs crisis and an economic emergency, and it deserves to be responded to here in Alberta in the same way that it would be in Ontario or Quebec.